start. Hey everyone. Thank you so much, Lulu and Alana. Yeah, here we are starting a new market. It's home for many of us. We want to do the best job we can. We're operating in this really uncertain environment. And at the same time, it's really exciting. You know, if you're choosing to open a dispensary, there's a good chance you love weed, you love the community and the culture around it like I do. So it can be a lot of fun. It's also just a lot of things to learn every day. A lot that I've been learning along the way. And so you know, I'll talk about brand selection today, product selection, and then you know, Jesse will be speaking on onboarding and Dave on marketing, brand activation, everything's along those lines. So I'll just run through the presentation and definitely happy to take any questions at the end. My contact information will be available as well. So like, I'm happy to act as a resource however I can. And you know I'm also speaking to like people with a broad range of experience. So I apologize if anything for anybody is like obvious or if I'm missing anything, but like I'm trying to cover a lot of ground here. So I'm just gonna pop open this presentation. All right, let me see if this is working. It is working. All right, questions to ask during brand and product selection. So I'll just start by giving you a little intro to Gotham and our nonprofit partner Strive. So Gotham is a female-founded cannabis concept store offering a curated selection of cannabis and accessory products. The intention of the space is to create a positive retail experience and foster community. We're partnered with Strive, which is a nonprofit that's been dedicated to providing education and skills training to previously incarcerated people to assist in getting them back into the workforce. They've been in existence for 38 years doing amazing work. We're like honored and humbled that they chose to work with us for this dispensary. So the overview of what I'm going to go through is what's your buying strategy, what's your budget and buying volume, doing your research on sales and product trends, vetting the brands, farms, and manufacturers to choose who to work with, and then sampling products and your nuts and bolts checklist. So starting with, what is your brand strategy? So this is sort of broad overview, like what brands excite you? Are there brands you already know about that excite you? What brands stand out for one reason or another? Either the formulation is exceptional, your experience when you try it is exceptional, it has great packaging, it has great marketing. And then who do you want to support? You know, who are the owners of these brands and farms and manufacturers? And who do you know, you have an opportunity here to support, you know, certain entities. So who do you want to align with there? Take the time to talk to the brands, the farms, and the processors, listen to their stories, their inspirations. There are more and more brands coming online every day. So, you know, a lot of it starts with just getting to know who's out there, getting to know people, going to networking events, coming out, going to the dispensaries, and just getting to know the community. So when it comes to how much to get, you know, what's the right amount? I would say it's a shot in the dark for most people at the beginning. We're gonna, on the following slides, we'll go into analyzing data, we'll go into headset reports, but I would say for the most part, you know, try to start small and test the waters with different brands. So what does that mean exactly? What does start small mean exactly? That's where it's going to be really important to find analytical data from existing markets in other states, where headset is a good option for that. Also, You could talk to other colleagues in the industry around, what they're experiencing. So you could ask the farms, the manufacturers, the brands, like, what is a typical purchase order size? Can you recommend to me? Oh, so here's an example of a headset report. This shows, it's kind of small. I hope you can see it okay. This shows product category breakdown. So, for example, flour, edibles, concentrates, beverages, pre-rolls, tinctures are your typical product categories in New York right now. So you can see this red is flour, orange is pre-roll, gray is vape pens. So once you decide your overall sales volume, then you're going to want to break that up among these categories. So this data is showing it broken down monetarily and also by unit. You could pick which one to work with. You could work with both, but basically once you establish your overall volume that you're going to purchase, you'll use this data to segment it down to how much you're getting of each product category. So here we are, more about, how much do you want to start with? So what are your sales forecasts for when you open, considering that most places they start at one scale and they scale up from there? You can look at data from other states. You can look at headset reports. You can talk to the other retailers. You can same thing, talk to the farms, talk to the manufacturers. And then the flip side of that is, what's your budget? How much money do you have allocated to spend on products? So that might be that will probably be a very big determining factor in how much inventory you start with. When you're thinking about your budget and how much money you have to factor in that lag time between when you buy the product and when the bill is due and when you sell the product. So a lot of suppliers are offering net 30 terms. So you have 30 days from when you receive the inventory to when the invoice is due. That is the maximum length of time that OCM allows right now. And that can really help modulate your cash flow and your budget. Another thing to consider when you're thinking about how much to start with is, how much space do you have in your vault, right? So all of your inventory is going to need to be stored in a vault. Most of the time, especially here in New York City, spaces are really tight. So that might be a limiting factor. You can ask the vendors to give you the dimensions of, case packs of different products of theirs. And you can calculate how much space, is 100 pounds going to take up? How much space is flour going to take up versus edibles? Same thing in your display cases. How much space do you have? What's your strategy for merchandising the display cases? Because that will also inform, like, how many products can you carry? So here I'm talking more about gathering information to determine your product category breakdown, which I touched on a previous slide as well. And so now we've covered budget, your total sales volume forecast, product category breakdown, and identifying which brands you want to work with based on more of the ideological alignment or cultural alignment, or other things that interest you about the brands. So when you're thinking about how many brands to bring on, one thing to consider is the maintenance of all of the brands. So Jesse's going to touch on onboarding. Dave is going to touch on brand activation, marketing, and education. So for each brand you bring on, it's one thing to put in a purchase order. It's another thing to maintain consistent communication with them for reorders. It's another thing to maintain a compliant file with each of them. It's another thing to continue to collaborate on marketing and in-store brand activation. So you really have to think about what you can manage. And this is another example where maybe it's good to start small. And once you have a system down that works for you, build from there, build your portfolio from there. So beyond that sort of philosophical, cultural interest in different brands, it's important to really vet the products, vet the brands. So when I'm looking at flower, so flower, you know, it is one of the bigger product categories, even though edibles are really taking the lead here in New York lately. But, you know, flower is one of the harder things to vet, I would say. So things I pay attention to out the gate are the harvest calendar. So here we are, we're in June right now. So it might be that there are some greenhouse facilities that have just gotten harvested or that are getting harvested soon. Come October, November, December, we're looking at the main harvest season where there's outdoor, most farms do a large outdoor crop. There are going to be more options at that time. But then come April, for example, you have to find out if the farms are still offering the product from that previous harvest, or if they're having mixed light at that point, or they had an additional greenhouse harvest. Along the same lines, you know, cannabis is a cured product. So as long as it's dried properly, cured properly, stored properly, it actually has, it stores very well, but those are all things that you are going to want to vet with the farms, ask about their drying practices, their curing practices, their storage practices. Another important thing is, are the products passing all lab tests? So the next slide, I'll show you an example of a certificate of analysis and all the required testing. Shelf life of products is important. So most products, I think, from a legal standpoint, have a year-long shelf like expiry. But in reality, some things last more than a year. Some things, you know, you don't want them on the shelf for a year. So that's something also you got to just talk to the vendors and ask what their experience is of what they would recommend as far as shelf life of products. What payment terms are available? Obviously, you know, the better terms you can get, the more you can put on your shelf with a lower budget. So, you know, it's something to take into consideration, but it's not the only thing. Another thing is, you know, I think we're seeing less and less of this, but in the past few months, there were bottlenecks with the lab tests, with packaging coming from overseas. We were concerned about there being like blips in flower availability in between harvests. So those are all things also you can touch on with the farms and processors and brands, and just ask them, hey, have you experienced any bottlenecks to your production? You know, how long do you need between when we place an order and when you can fulfill an order? So let me just skip over to the certificate of analysis since I touched on that before. So actually, I'll go in order. So back to, okay, so we vetted the brands, farms, and processors. So now by now you should have a good idea of who you're most interested in vetting further, at which point it's time to sample. So sampling is so important, and it's also can be, you know, it's one of the best parts of the job. What can I say? People love helping you sample. You get to sample yourself. So now in this regulated environment, you know, we have to do it according to certain OCM rules. So the rules that the OCM has established is that the samples have to be entered into the inventory system. So for example, at Gotham, we use Dutchie. And then there's two ways to do it. The way that is written in the regs is basically to put those samples into a room called something like QC samples, and then notate who's getting the sample and subtract that item from the overall inventory. We are finding that is challenging for our inventory tracking. So what we're doing is actually running it through the register, but at a penny. So, you know, the important thing for the OCM is that the inventory is tracked when it comes in and is tracked when it's going out. Both of those methods accomplish that. So another thing I've established for sampling purposes is I created a questionnaire, and it's really fun because it's a way for me to get feedback from people, and people enjoy sharing their experiences, but it's a way where I can track it, because it's hard when I am sharing, you know, hundreds of samples for me to remember what everyone's experience is when they just tell me. So it's been a super helpful tool. I created my questionnaire in Google. They have like Google Forms. So I listed out the questions: type of product, brand, name of the product, how much did you ingest, how did it make you feel, you know, the taste, the nose, the harshness or smoothness, were you satisfied, would you buy it again, like, you know, basic questions. It's important information to gather. Another thing is keeping a journal. So if you're sampling yourself, keeping a journal can be really helpful. I think even for those of us that have been using weed for a long time, it takes it to a whole new level when it becomes your job to try a lot of weed, where you like need these tools to assist your memory. So you've looked through the information you've received in the questionnaire, you've tried a bunch of samples yourself, you know, you've asked your staff for their feedback. And so here you are, you have a pretty good idea of what you want to order. So you want to make sure that everything's going to be compliant, that you buy. So here we are, nuts and bolts. So you want to make sure the certificate of analysis is complete and that it's passing in every category. So what is a complete certificate of analysis? Here, I'll just quickly read down the different tests that are required. So potency, pesticides, microbial impurities, mycotoxins, and trace metals. At a quick glance, you can see if the product passes for all of these tests. It's important to also note there are, I think, 5 or 6 different tests. So it's not enough to see one pass. You really have to make sure that every one of these tests is included in the C of A that you get. So are there any failing or incomplete lab results? Obviously, okay, that's got to pause, check with the vendor. Another thing is, do the potency readings on the lab results match with the potency readings on the labels? I think vendors are getting better with this, but at first, there were some mismatches, and, you know, we don't want to pass along that mismatch to the customer. So it is something it's important to check as early as you can and catch any issues like that. Another important nuts and bolts thing is checking for state compliant labels. So this is, the state has provided a long list. The more you check labels, the more you'll just get comfortable with, you know, what to look for. Did we provide? Okay, so here I have the lab results. So we'll provide a link to the state guidelines where you can see the packaging requirements. Here you can see an example of a certificate of analysis. So we got potency, terpenes, which I don't think is required unless the product is advertising terpenes on its packaging. Foreign matter, which might also be called microbial impurities on other tests. Pesticides, So there's actually 3 different panels of pesticide tests. Mycotoxins, heavy metals, and that sums it up. So we can quickly look a little more closely at the lab results to try to understand what you're looking at. So let's see. Oops. So potency, you got the total cannabinoids here. This is saying it's 18.94% total cannabinoids, and then the total THC, which is 16%. Okay, so usually when the lab results, first the lab results will list delta-9 THCA, and then it will calculate it out to THC. So when you see a delta-9 THCA count, it's always going to be a little bit higher than the THC count. So make sure you're looking at the right THC potency number on these lab results. I'm going to skip ahead to pesticides to just quickly give an idea of how to read these. So you have level of quantification, the allowable limit, and the result. So you can see here that the presence of any of these pesticides in the sample was so small that the system testing it could not even read it. So ND stands for not detectable. So things are looking pretty clean over here. I'm skipping over to heavy metals. Same thing, you have level of quantification, allowable limit, and result. So this is showing there is 4.4 units of copper. The allowable limit is 30. So we're in pretty good shape there. But that's kind of, it's good to get familiar with what you're looking at and not just look at the pass fail. But as you're learning, the pass fail is, a helpful tool to have. So when you are ready, when you have synthesized, what brands do you want to carry? What products of theirs do you want to carry? Is it the right time of year to buy those products from them? Is it the right time for you to buy? Are you ready? Do you have your vault ready? Then it's time to go ahead and place a purchase order. So here's a sample purchase order. Pretty straightforward document. And I am open to any questions.
We got a couple questions for you, Miri. We have one. When you select products for your dispensary, do you look at the yeast and mold and microbial impurity numbers? I mean, you went through that with the COA. Are you looking at like specific thresholds in that as well? Or are you just kind of determining based on the pass fail of the test itself?
If the test is passing, then I generally am comfortable with it. These tests are designed to allow these tests have very low thresholds. So when we consider how much we come in contact with, all of these different elements in our daily lives, it's much higher than we're going to find on a passing lab result. So generally, I'm comfortable with a pass on those tests.
Got it. Awesome. I have another question. So what is the best way for someone to get in touch with you? Like if they wanted to be considered for product, like what's the best way that you and Gotham like to be approached?
Yeah, email is great. And, I appreciate that question. I think brands really tend to want to get in front of buyers, and part of the job of a buyer is managing those expectations, managing those relationships, those new relationships. And email is best for me. That's just how that allows me to keep organized with all of the different points of contact. A lot of brands like to stop in and give samples to all the staff, which is very nice, but it can be kind of disorganized. And also, I personally don't like when the staff is getting samples prior to me vetting the product and prior to me deciding if we're carrying it or not, because I find it can be confusing for them. So I would say, email is a good place to start.
So emailing you, making an appointment, and like, having a touch base with you first. And, do they bring samples with you? And somebody asked, how many, Jackie asked, is there a certain number of samples they should bring in for you?
I guess it depends what where we are at in the relationship. I mean, if it's somebody that I'm already in discussion with, I already have a good idea of what we're interested in, then it's a question of, is the sample for me or is the sample for the staff? And then we would, figure out the appropriate amount.
Awesome. I have another question from Benjamin. Can you discuss product assortment in terms of premium versus value?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And how do you position your own store in those terms?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. So let's see. When I designed our assortment, our opening assortment, I looked at it as I was looking at it as premium, mid-tier, and then price leader. And so everything we bought falls in one of those categories. And that's something that every dispensary has to decide for themselves. So Gotham was going for more of a curated high-end approach. So we were leaning more towards the premium products out the gate. That said, now we're open and we're finding that people really love to get that, get what they're getting and then get that one joint that was, that $9 joint or that $20 product. So we're actually adding in more of those other products, which doesn't mean that they're necessarily price leaders or lower quality. It just means they're smaller sized units. But in answer to your question, I would say, it's different for every dispensary. Some dispensaries might choose that they want to have, more competitive pricing. So you're going to lean into more of the price leaders and the mid-tier products. But I would say, it's important to have some strategy out the gate, because it can be, once you start meeting with buyers, it can be really tempting when you see something that's a good price. I think for most of us, at least, we're like, oh, that's a great deal, I want to get that. But you have to stay true to the philosophy and the strategy that you set out to accomplish.
Would it be fair to say, Miri, that you should also be flexible in terms of learning and I think New York is I'm interested to see what, the actual buying kind of patterns are in terms of product category, in terms of age, in terms of all of those things, because I'm a data nerd.
Yeah.
Do you think, has there been any surprises for you so far?
As far as like what people want?
Yeah, in terms of what people want.
I don't know that. I mean, I definitely see, yeah, actually. So the two things I would say people want that I didn't start with were these smaller unit items. So once again, not necessarily like price leader, lower quality, but just smaller sized units and also larger size units. So typically in a new market, it's normal that the vendors start with the products that capture 30% of sales in that product category. But here we are 4 months in and we get requests for, an ounce of flour and a single joint. And so we're going to add that in. But it is so important to be flexible and be responsive to the feedback that you're getting from your customers and also from your sales associates, because they really are on the front lines and become experts in their own right. But I would say out the gate, it's important, like as you're coming in contact with so many brands and farms and processors and so many offerings, it's really easy to get pulled in a lot of different directions. And so out the gate, I think it is important to have a good idea of your approach and stick with that until you open and can make adjustments based on feedback.
Awesome. Speaking of kind of statistics and analytics, because I know a lot of the folks are, from other from learnings are using other types of analytics and data to help drive product selection, buying X, Y, and Z. Can you talk about any other analytics software that you're using other than Headset that you prefer, that people should be looking out for as well?
I've been on Headset. I look directly in Dutchy. We are also signed up with Surfside and Spring Break. So all of these different platforms provide different data points. But as far as like my scope of work, I'm mostly using Headset.
I have a quick question regarding, you talked about, your personal sampling. You talked about doing a questionnaire. Like, I think maybe that's used probably for your internal team. Are there thresholds in terms of like the questionnaire data that you get that where you say, yes, that's the brand that I want? Like, what I want to learn, I guess what I want to learn is a little bit more about like, how do you determine if that's a brand that you want to carry in the store outside of, just your personal
Yeah.
take?
So, I mean, there are just so many factors that go into each product selection. So I can I'll start with edibles because that's a really big category here in New York. So first off, I provide that questionnaire, and I provide that questionnaire to anybody I share samples with. So probably So when on the questions, would you buy it again? Would you buy it for a friend or family member? Those are like an easy place to start. If anybody writes no to both of those, I'm going to read the rest of their feedback to see what happened. Another important thing is sometimes this happens with edibles where somebody writes, it was weak. And so I look, I'm like, okay, well, how much of it did you eat? Oh, okay, well, you ate half of a 5 milligram. Or, I've gotten feedback where somebody tried a product that was supposed to be, I think, 40 milligrams, and they said, I didn't feel it. So and then I got 3 different pieces of feedback on products from that brand. So when that happens, okay, well, I'm going to pause and, continue to sample that out. Maybe talk to the brand to see if they've heard anything similar from other people using the product. But I would say, like, for edibles, for example, the most important things is, how does it taste? Do people like how it tastes? How does it hit? Packaging is really important. I think I've been told that's just an American thing. Americans love good packaging. So that's important also. Even if a product is delicious, is it going to stand out on the shelf? Along the same lines, are there marketing efforts and brand activation efforts behind it? But I would say, like, when it comes to edibles, you start with, how does it taste and how does it make you feel? And how's the packaging? For flower, there are a lot more criteria. For flower, you're looking at for flower, you're looking at, sorry, I'm having trouble looking at myself while I'm talking. For flower, you're looking at, okay, you look at it, how's the color? Does it, is it bright green? Is it bright purple? How does it feel in your hands? Is it crunching when you touch it, or does it have a little give? how are the trichomes? Are they looking brown? Are they looking white? Or, is it sugary? Are you not really seeing the trichomes that much? What's the snug structure? Like, different consumers have a variety of preferences when it comes to nug structure, but so when you're looking for something, you kind of want to find the happy medium. If it's too big, well, there might be more concerns around mold. If it's too small, customers might complain that, this should be categorized as smalls, not flower, not nugs, not A buds, top nugs. Obviously nose is really important when it comes to flower. So that's another fun part. If you're into that sort of thing, I mean, really, the more weed you smell, the more array of terpene profiles you come across. And I think, it's pretty magical. So, at the end of the day, something like what it smells like, if it's good or bad, beauty is in the eye of the beholder on that type of thing. At the same time, there are trends at any given point. Here in New York, sour diesel has been a classic for years. People here still, there is a following for that fuel, gassy, chemically nose. Lemon cherry gelato has been really popular the past year or so, the past couple years. So lemon cherry, that's more of a candy nose, a little, maybe a little cream element, maybe a little gas at the end. So getting familiar with the different noses is just a matter of smelling a lot of weed and also smoking it. At the end of the day, it just comes down to personal preference, but not just your preference or my preference, the preference of your consumers. And so, if you're newer to weed, that's something you'll get more familiar with over time. At the same time, you can, go to Leafly, go to Weed Maps, look in other states, see what's popular on the menus, see what there are articles about, top 10 strains of the year, read about it, see what the characteristics are that people like about it. When you, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's totally fine. Yeah, something we're finding, which we kind of already knew, is, sativas are really popular here in New York, which is very much a New York thing. I haven't seen that anywhere else, where they're just like more popular than hybrids or indicas. So that's something important to consider also if you're choosing, 5 different strains from one brand. Well, maybe you want to make sure you get at least 2 of those or 2 of those that are sativa. You want to make sure you have a balance of sativa, indica, hybrid. So that can be a helpful tool when you're trying to narrow down what to get.
I'm kind of not surprised that, we have sativa preference here, at least in New York City, because everyone is like, go, 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 go.
Yeah.
We have one question about edibles before I move on to cannabis beverage question. Edibles, like, are you looking at ingredients, or, tell me how you kind of go through that?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, everything we carry has very clean ingredients, and really, I can't think of any edibles brands that have come to us that don't have clean ingredients. That's definitely important to us. One thing I'm actually a little surprised about is how many people want vegan gummies. So thankfully, I would say most of our gummies are vegan, meaning that they're pectin based rather than gelatin based. But that actually was a bit of a surprise to me, of just how many people are asking about that. Aside from that, there's one processor that uses, fruit and then freeze dries it down, and he uses the freeze dried powder as his inputs, or he'll juice, peaches himself and use that peach juice as the inputs in his edibles. So I appreciate those sorts of formulations. I'm trying to think of other examples. I think it depends who your target market is, but for us, I'm happy we have sort of a cross section. So we have some products that are using natural ingredients like that, and other products that are more like, hey, we want to hit this candy flavor. We want it to taste like peach rings, for example. So they're using whatever flavoring to make it taste like that. And so there's space for both of those. But I think another thing to touch on edibles is there are so many edibles out there. And our part of our curation goal was to really, for every brand we carry, to have its own lane. We felt that that would make it easier for the sales associates to speak to every product and the customers to like simplify their decision-making process. So that also comes down to what is the input in the product. So for example, some edibles start with nano-emulsified or micro-emulsified THC particles. Others start with distillate. Others start with live rosin. Others live resin. Others start with cured rosin. So what are all of those? They're all different forms of concentrates. So yeah, I mean, for me, the way I went about it is trying to select one brand or one cluster of products that fits each of those boxes. It's not an exact science. And this is where, like, as you're meeting people and trying to make these decisions and tasting all these things, there's so much good stuff out there. There's so many lovely people that you're going to want to work with. And so it is tough, but that's where it's really important out the gate, I think, to stick to a strategy. Once you open and take in feedback and see how fast things are moving, then you can add to your assortment.
That's great feedback. I mean, I think all those things you just mentioned about concentrates, I think that's great research for people that are interested, because New York has always been a flower-based state. So I'm really excited to see all of the products that are going to be coming out from, concentrates and the extraction, distillation, post-processing side of the house. And we have a question about cannabis beverages. How are sales so far with cannabis beverages? And follow-up question after you answer that.
Yeah, I'm happy with our sales on beverages. Yeah, it's a small category. That's what we were expecting, but people are happy with them. In all of our sampling protocol, people find them delicious. I think they're delicious. And I also stand behind them in that I think it's the easiest one-for-one exchange with alcohol. So I think it has a really specific application. For example, for people that don't drink alcohol for one reason or another, it's an easy alternative. You still have that can in your hand. And I think here in New York, I mean, we tend to drink a lot, but I think some people maybe are realizing, hey, I don't like being hungover so much. And they're trying the weed drink and they're finding it's a good thing. So obviously it doesn't have to be a drink. It could be an edible or smoke a joint, but the drink is a nice one-to-one swap out with alcohol. And we're having positive results with it in the store.
Love that. I mean, as an Asian woman who I don't have that enzyme that breaks down alcohol. So I'm actually allergic to alcohol. So I love the cannabis beverages actually. And I love that it's like low MG. So I'm a 5 mg lady and I'm happy at that. Follow-up question to that from Ryan. What are your thoughts on bud tender appreciation events? For example, off-site events, bringing bud tenders and brands together?
We love that kind of thing. Like for us personally, we're still figuring out how to execute on a lot of that. We've had certain brands invite us and invite our teams to events. So, we super appreciate that. We make sure our staff is aware of it. I think it's just, something that our marketing team has to work into their agenda.
And Ryan, if you are part of CAURD, we're hosting Buyers Club next week. So it's going to be the largest gathering of licensees on the CAURD side and some operators and the AUCC, AUCPs and brands. So if you're interested in, exhibiting, or if you're interested in attending, please just go to ontherevel.com or hit me up at lulu@ontherevel.com, and happy to have you join us. I think also there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of unknowns. We're kind of operating still in this gray area where can you give product out to bud tenders versus only to owners and buyers of the license? Can you sell directly? There's a lot of things. So I think that, CANY is also a great organization for folks to join. I joined CANY because I wanted my voice heard in my opinions of like what I believed things should be happening on the retail side. So if folks are interested in participating, CANY is a really great organization to like really move the trade, our industry forward. I love you guys, Dan and Alana. One more question for, let's see. Curious to hear how you view maintaining a dynamic menu that remains notably different from other dispensaries close to your store. Do you consider asking brands for exclusive SKUs just for your store?
That's a great question. So I think when we all opened, there's only a handful of us open right now. And back in, we started planning for our existing inventory back in January. And at that point, there were even few brands and products available. And so there was this concern we would all be replicas of each other. But even by now, there are a lot more brands out there. And I think there's a natural differentiation happening because we each do have a different strategy, different buying strategy, different target market. We're getting different feedback and sales patterns, a lot of overlap, but also some different. So, and even if, we're all carrying the same brand, we're choosing different products from that brand. So I think it is important to find ways to differentiate, and it seems to be happening pretty naturally, in my opinion, as much as, there's the concern that there's only so many brands and we're all going to have the same thing. That's not really what I'm finding.
And I think that's what's interesting about your store, Miri, is that you guys are, it's a whole concept store, right? It's not just cannabis. There's lifestyle brands in there. There's books in there. There's like a lot of really beautiful things and objects and, interesting finds that speak to a cannabis consumer's lifestyle, not just the cannabis itself.
Yeah. And if you think about, going to whatever grocery store you go to, most grocery stores have the same produce,
Yeah.
I mean, but for one reason or another, you're attracted to going to the one that you go to. So, and the apple at one grocery store might be from one farm, from the other grocery store, it's from a different farm and it's a different strain of apple. And so there are these distinctions that happen, even though, yes, on the surface, it all is similar.
And I think sometimes it's one farm that's producing lots of brands of apples out there.
And also that speaks to branding. So, branding is maybe the most important thing when it comes to purchasing decisions. It's when I've worked on the supply side for a while. And so it's funny when you see, the same distillate go into 5 pens, but one pen is so popular and the other one can't get off the ground. And so much of it boils down to branding, the brand activations, the marketing, and all of that contributes to the end user's experience. So it's valid that, even if the oil or even the hardware could be different, but the oil is the same. So there are a lot of things that contribute to the end user's sort of experience and perception of differentiation of products.
And I just wanted to, encourage folks, as you're working on your brand, like you can definitely hire your brothers, sisters, girlfriends who just graduated from design school, or you can also, hire someone that has been working in cannabis. So I know I've seen as market starts, a lot of people go towards friends and people that they trust, which is amazing, but just know that there's going to be a ramp up time to get used to what's actually compliant in cannabis, specifically around the packaging. So, and I just want to say there's definitely a difference between a package designer and a logo, brand, marketing, advertisement type of graphic designer. So just wanted to comment on that as well, about, you know, packaging and the necessary things that you need to do to stay in compliant with guidelines, which changes all the time, that we've seen in other markets. A couple more questions for you, Miri. How do you generally handle products that won't sell? Do you have a return agreement with vendors? Like, how is that handled?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we need to flesh out more internally, just getting agreements like that in place. But so far, we've been operating really just having strong relationships with our vendors where we're aligned in you know, we have the same goals in mind, right? So how do we handle products that aren't selling or are selling slowly? Vendors have been really actually offering to do swap outs, because we're all figuring this out as we go, right? So if there's one product that I purchased more of, it's everything. So I should start by saying everything we carry is selling. It's just a matter of how fast is it selling. So now I'm selling out of some things, other things maybe I'm long on. So vendors have actually been really accommodating to say, hey, I see you're long on this one thing, and you know, you're about to put in an order on this other thing. Why don't we take back why don't you do a return? So I'm not starting a new, you know, we're using credit essentially that I then have with them. So that's not something I would assume, you know, will happen with, you know, that every vendor will be amenable to, but we've established, you know, we're very much relationship based and we're all new in this. And so it's so important to just build those lines of communication and flexibility in both directions. But 100% in the long run, having agreements like that in place is the way to go. At the same time, from previous experience, you know, you want to, I should speak for me. Sometimes when I if you're going to have those sorts of agreements in place, you want to keep them really clean and simple, because a lot of time can be lost on, you know, legalese and negotiating terms for these contingent scenarios. So I think, you know, if you can get a master supply agreement in place or simple clauses in place, that can go a long way. But at the end of the day, it's really about like maintaining good lines of communication and building healthy relationships, I'd say.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Galena, and I hope I said that right. She asked the non-cannabis, like the non-plant touching, the ancillary accessories. Are you allowed to have your name or logo on them?
So I am not the expert on that, but if I remember correctly, yes. Gotham can carry Gotham branded accessories. Gotham cannot carry cannabis brand accessories. So for example, you know, we can't have Flower House t-shirts, but we can have Gotham t-shirts.
Oh, interesting. So the retailer can carry merch that's of the retailers, but you cannot carry merch of brands.
If I remember correctly, I have to say that that section of the regs are very unclear and contradictory. And so I don't want to speak to it as an expert because I don't personally understand it myself. But you know, we consulted with our attorneys and interpreted the regs as best we could, and that was our understanding.
So Galena, I think just to clarify your question, are you talking about like vape, like, you know, water pipes and pipes and things like that? She said, we are not supposed to carry any accessories that do not have our brand on them. Branded merchandise and apparel containing the licensee's brands, including jewelry and accessories.
Yeah, I would say the regs are quite contradictory and are constantly getting reinterpreted. And our most recent understanding was that the OCM was, you know, revisiting them to make them clearer.
Yeah, and I think there's, I mean, we're in like conditional regs right now, so I think the final ones will be coming out, and in most cases. They will still be worked on over and over. So what we have right now at this month, at this date, is probably not going to be the same regs that we'll have in what, 2 months, 3 months, maybe, versus next year. So I really applaud all the folks that are in this right now. And, you know, going through this chaos, I think we're all kind of addicted to chaos if you're going to be in cannabis. So thank you everyone for your time.
Lulu?
Yes.
A note on the regs, so the final regs were released, or not the final, the second draft regulations were released on May 11th, and they just hit the New York State Register today, which means that the 45-day public comment period starts today. So these are, what's that? So no, this is the second draft. So the first draft was released, what was it, like late last year?
Yeah.
And then they went through a 60-day public comment period, and then they went through revisions, and they released the revised draft
Recently
on May 11th, and then it has to go into this like Byzantine process inside of New York State government, and then when it hits this New York State Register, which it did today, that starts the second public comment period, which is 45 days. And the OCM has indicated that they're not going to go in for another round of public comments. So these regulations that you can see now are likely the final version.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
He's my repository of information whenever I need it. Thank you, Dan. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight, this Thursday. Thank you, Miri, so much. Appreciate all of your knowledge and your time. Thursday, Jesse Robertson, the buyer from Housing Works Cannabis, will be joining us to talk about the next step. So once Miri says we're going to take your product, then Jesse's going to talk about how he onboards it into the store and how he receives it. So I think that's it.
Thank you so much.